Hello, I'm Raafet Azzouz, founder of the MIT New Colossus project. I'm a Sloan fellow here at MIT. Before that, I was for 2 decades a Wall Street executive in quantitative finance in New York City and London. I'm Tunisian, born and raised. I studied in France, but then I worked in New York City and in London. So we started the MIT New Colossus project with a group of brilliant master graduate students here at the Institute for several reasons. First, we wanted to shine a light on the stories of extraordinary immigrant trailblazers here in America. From this conversation, we wanted to learn from their achievements and their journeys, how they overcame challenges and hurdles, how they built community, how they raised hundreds or billions of dollars in order to achieve venture success. We hope through this project to inspire the next generation of brilliant minds coming to America to achieve extraordinary impossible missions. I hope you will enjoy these conversations as much as we do, and it will resonate with you. For this episode of the MIT New Colossus project, I have a conversation with Dmitry Balyasny. Dmitry is the managing partner and chief investment officer of Balyasny Asset Management, also known as BAM. BAM is a global multi-strategy investment firm with more than $21 billion of assets under management and 1,900 investment professionals around the world. Before BAM and Wall Street, Dmitry was born in Kyiv, which was then the Soviet Union. He immigrated at 7 with his parents to Chicago. He was not speaking English. I've known of Dmitry for quite some time. I really enjoyed this conversation. I believe Dmitry's journey from Kyiv to founding a globally recognized investment firm is a testament of the power of perseverance, innovation, as well as entrepreneurial spirit. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Good morning, Dmitry.
Morning.
How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you for taking the time. Having been in the markets myself for a long time, your story is extraordinary. And as part of this MIT New Colossus project, where we are shedding light on the journeys of trailblazing immigrant founders in the United States, we thought that your path is worth highlighting, and your lessons are important, but beyond that is to inspire the next generation who is coming to America, and we're excited to have you.
Thank you. I don't know about extraordinary. I have a lot of I have a lot of friends that have been on, I would say, similar journeys, and parents like many immigrants move to this country for better opportunity for their kids, and I don't think there's anything that surprising about kind of my journey. I think it's part of the opportunities that we have.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And look, your humility is commendable. You have built a hedge fund in 20 years who manages 20 billion plus with hundreds of employees. But I would love to start actually by going back in time when you arrived here.
Sure.
Was some years ago when you were 7 years old?
Yeah, I was born in Kyiv, and I think it was pretty typical, Jewish immigration type of story where I wouldn't have the opportunities, back in Russia at the time, and the Ukraine officially now, that my parents thought I would have here, and being an only child, that was kind of the impetus, for their move, and it was a very difficult move for my parents primarily. I was very young, so it was challenging for me. But for my parents, like many immigrants, I think leaving all the familiar, stable things that they were used to was tough. And at that time, in order to get permission to leave, you had to tell the government that you were going to move to Israel, and then you switch trains and planes, and it was like a whole to-do because they wouldn't officially allow immigration to the U.S. But even with that, as soon as you asked for permission, you were immediately fired from your job. And so for about a year, you had to live off whatever meager savings you had at the time, which wasn't much, while sort of being ostracized, by the government and and people in general there at the time.
Yeah.
So it's pretty tough for my parents. And then moving here, as typical immigrant experience, where you have no language, you have no assets, you have no resources. We had a little bit of help from some. Nonprofit organizations and a couple relatives that moved slightly before we did, but it's pretty difficult period for my parents to kind of get on their feet and go from engineering jobs and college professor jobs to cleaning motel rooms.
Yeah, I mean it's very challenging.
Yeah.
I mean, and even from an ego standpoint and a standing standpoint and restarting from zero.
Yeah.
And but what was your expectation? I mean, you were young, right? What did you know of America?
Nothing.
Nothing.
I had no expectations. I had no idea where we were going or what we were doing. I spoke zero English, and all sorts of funny stories in retrospect where we arrived midway through the school year and I was put into third grade, and then they figured out I couldn't speak English or didn't think I was very bright and put me back into second grade. And then the following year I caught up a little bit, and then I guess they figured out I wasn't remedial, and then they put me into fourth grade. So I never actually went to third grade. So there was a lot of stuff like that as we were trying to kind of get our feet under us a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it's part of coming here in those days and actually trying to adjust in a way, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it was a huge adjustment. Today I think it's a difficult adjustment for people. I give my kids the example all the time when they complain about doing something new of, the type of move that, their grandparents had to do. And as a comparison of imagine being dropped off in China with no language, but today, even with that, it's still substantially easier because, you can pull up things on the internet. There's informational resources. At that time, there was very little. It was all kind of hearsay and trying to figure things out on your own. But it was also quite an amazing change. Again, more for my parents than me at the time, where you walk into a supermarket and it's like everything you want on the shelves. They'd never seen anything like that.
Yeah.
Right. Russia at the time was very bare bones, and you had to stand in line for hours to get a jug of milk. Right.
It's a massive change, culturally,
Yep.
personally, for your family.
Yep.
And if I understand correctly, you arrive here with all these kind of challenges, to restart, to adapt, so on and so forth. And I know from, I know that you actually started working very young. You started doing, jobs like you were doing door-to-door sales at 12, and then you sought a licensed stockbroker license later on in college. I mean, it's very unusual. Not many kids do that. What was your driver behind it? What was behind that?
I wanted to make money.
Mm-hmm.
That was basically the driver at a young age. I wasn't really thinking about, career experience or, in retrospect, that actually was, much more valuable, of course. Kind of learning the perseverance and grit of having to go through all sorts of, sales jobs and, getting door slammed in your face for a long time. But at the time, I was just looking for ways to make some extra money, right? Because money was fairly tight. My parents always worked extra jobs. My dad drove a cab after work. Delivered pizzas after work. Did all sorts of things after full-time job during the day. And so it wasn't anything unusual if I wanted some extra money for myself. I thought sales was a good way to do it because it's one of the few jobs where you can get paid on a performance basis at a young age, right? Mm-hmm. There's no hedge fund meritocracy compensation scheme for kids in high school.
Yeah.
Right. You get paid minimum wage for most jobs, and so that wasn't very appealing. Whereas with sales, you get a percentage of whatever you sold. And so, that's why I kind of did sales and wound up, earning a good amount of money for, a young kid at the time.
Yeah. Well, so you get to university and you after doing all this work to actually earn money to actually pay for it. And when you get to university, you're clearly interested into markets, right? Mm-hmm. You have this, you're going there, right? What was driving that? Because that's also at a young age, you don't come from a universe of financiers, of traders.
Yeah, we're just as a side note, we're actually trying to help with that type of situation, where we started a Atlas Scholar program where we provide college scholarships and combined with finance internships to kids basically in that type of situation where it gives them the network and the exposure and the experience combined with with help paying for school for very high merit kids who might not have that type of resourcing. Right? At the time, I just got interested. Initially in junior high, we had a stock market contest that I randomly did well in just by pure luck, and then I started reading up on investing as I'd always been interested in kind of successful business people in general. So founders of companies, CEOs, investors, and it sort of led me down that path. And I just thought it was a very interesting way to be involved in a lot of different types of businesses where you can get paid based on your performance, analyzing what would do well and what wouldn't. That was always very attractive to me from a monetary perspective, but also from a intellectual perspective, because I was always very interested in business. And so I was sort of amazed that you could actually have a career kind of doing that. Mm-hmm. And so I read a lot of investing books in school. I was kind of carrying the Wall Street Journal around in high school, and just started trading for myself a little bit and investing a little bit. And initially was quite bad at it, and slowly over time learned from various people to kind of systemize things a little bit more and develop the skill.
Yeah. It's not very common for someone in high school to carry the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, it wasn't, but I was I was making money from some of the sales jobs.
Of course. Yeah.
And so the natural next question, once you bought a few things, you're like, all right, well, what do I want to do with it? And so I started investing and became interested in that. Yeah. Unfortunately, at the time there wasn't much internet resources, and so you read things at the library, you read the paper, and you read books.
Yeah. And so you had this drive, and you wanted to start on the markets, but even with that drive, I understand it was difficult to actually get your first job, right? You had your first job at Schoenfeld, but it was not that easy to get the first job.
Well, before that, it was very difficult. So, I had all these different sales jobs, and so I felt that I had good kind of perseverance to, grind things out and figure them out. But I didn't really have any direct, finance experience. And so when I was 18, I learned you could apply for a stockbroker license at 18, which I didn't know about. And so I thought that was a good opportunity because it kind of mixed sales, which is basically what being a stockbroker at the time was, with finance. Mm-hmm. Right. So I thought I could learn the investing side of it and apply my sales skills. So that was really the first job while I was still attending school at Loyola and did that. But it did prove out to be much more sales than finance. And so I started investing, my own earnings from that, from the sales side of it, which I was good at, into just investing for myself, which I was not good at. And so I was losing all the earnings I was making in commissions from trading for myself. And, mm-hmm. But I was much more interested in trading than sales longer term. And I thought if I could get some instruction, I could figure it out because I really had a passion for it. And so I applied to every financial trading type of organization I could find, and all the hedge funds that were around at the time, which wasn't nearly as many proprietary trading firms. And I got nice rejection letters from a whole box of many of them. And then Schoenfeld I got very lucky with because they ran a newspaper ad, amazingly at the time, for wannabe traders. And they were looking for folks who didn't have a lot of experience, who didn't have a lot of preconceived notions, that they knew what worked in the markets. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, amazing, I qualify because I have no idea what's worked, because clearly what I'm doing is not working. And so I got the position, but it was also an interesting position because there was no compensation. It was all a base of zero.
Okay.
And so you had, but they did provide you a small amount of funds to trade, and then if you showed that you could generate some returns on those funds, then your capital would grow, and you could make money. And then the first year doing that, again demonstrated I didn't know what I was doing and had no P&L to show for it, and so you're trying to do that with no earnings. Mm-hmm. But after that, there were enough people to learn from who had some success, and I started picking up a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And systematizing a little bit more an approach, and then started, making money consistently after that. Mm.
So it was a rocky start.
Yes. But I think that's fortunate. I think actually a lot of times when people start in trading related or investing related, endeavors, and they have a lot of success to start, you really run the risk of having a large blow up, right? 100%. And I was very bad at the beginning. And actually went broke at the beginning personally because I was trading my own funds and then borrowing to trade more of my own funds while having no idea how to actually consistently trade. And so that was a very difficult lesson to learn, but I learned it on a small amount of capital at a young age, as opposed to if you start off, on the right foot, very often you really think you have it figured out. And then you inevitably learn that lesson at some point on much bigger scale. Yeah.
It makes sense. I mean, it's better to learn it earlier on at smaller scale than later on at bigger scale and with bigger consequences to it.
You kind of need to know that there's fire there, right? And it creates like a real risk management approach. Mm-hmm. Once it's kind of seared into you. Yeah. But until you learn it, reading about it is not the same thing. Mm.
So you had these formative years. I mean, it seems very formative years at Schoenfeld, where you basically learn the ropes mm-hmm. of trading, mm-hmm. and again, you learn it from zero to where you are, to where you were then. And I think it was in 2001, you decided to leave Schoenfeld and to create what is now Balyasny Asset Management, BAM, and here I'm actually curious on one thing, because it's a common hurdles that many immigrant founders have, is access to capital, how to raise it, and how to have the trust of investors. So you went on to create your own shop, and how did you go about access to capital, you building trust with investors and LPs, so on and so forth, at an early stage?
The way that we did it, and I actually think it's a pretty good approach, but it kind of disqualifies 99% of the people who want to start funds, is if you don't have enough of your own capital to really start trading and make a dent, you probably shouldn't start a fund, right? And the way you accumulate your own capital is you have to be good at investing and trading, mm-hmm. And that's your track record, right? And so you have to really be willing to back yourself to a significant degree. And then you can kind of scale from there with outside investor mm-hmm. capital. So our initial capital was 40 million, which was 20 million from me and 20 million from Steve Schoenfeld. Mm-hmm. Then we grew it substantially from profits, and then we started taking external capital a few years into it. Mm.
What was your relationship with Steve Schoenfeld? Was it a mentor of yours? What was your relationship with him?
I learned a lot from Stephen in terms of running a business, and also trading and a risk-taking philosophy, which I think was very helpful. Mm. Yeah.
It's did you have many mentors actually in your life, in your career? Because
I would say I've tried to take bits and pieces from successful folks who I've had the good fortune to meet, both in investing and other kind of business leaders, where mm-hmm. Because this business it's partially trading and investing, and then it's also partially running a company, right? And so in order to do it at scale, we have 2,000 people, for example, right? In order to do it at scale, like you need investing and trading skill, but you also have to figure out, how to actually run a business. And nobody out, ever really figures either one out, but you're constantly, working at it. And so I've every time I meet somebody who's successful in their particular type of business or their particular type of investing, I try to take something away from that, right? And so I've done that, with traders when I started, just sitting next to different types of traders. I try to encourage our guys now to go to different offices and sit with different types of portfolio managers, because you're always going to learn a different technique from somebody that you can apply. And same type of thing with business management folks. When you have the good fortune to meet somebody who's a good CEO, you could take a lot away from that you can apply.
Yeah. Do you think that requires a strong sense of humility to be able
Absolutely.
to do so?
Yeah, absolutely. Both of those things, like both running a company and adapting to markets, like it's a never-ending, quest to figure things out and improve. Like as soon as you think you have it figured out, something changes, and you quickly realize that you need a new way to do things. So it's a never-ending, process, which makes it challenging, but also keeps it interesting.
So if I understand correctly, your mentors were basically all the people that you have learned from throughout your career and life, that you kind of picked some gems or pearls of wisdom, as you went along, right?
Yeah, exactly. Some it's particular types of trading or risk taking. Some it's more on the management side. I had the good fortune to be able to help run a internal fund of funds in the early years, where we were invested with a lot of leading hedge fund managers at the time, just with our own kind of partner capital. And that was a great opportunity at a young age to kind of look under the hood a little bit and see how people did things and which types of firms stood the test of time, and what did they do differently, how did they manage risk, how did they incentivize traders, and which ones didn't. So through just getting to know different portfolio managers, different fund managers, different CEOs, you just pick stuff up.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense. I mean, actually, look, now you are 23 years in to BAM. If you look back, actually, and here I know you're a big fan of Ayn Rand, and actually I wanna touch upon this, but maybe on a different lens. So I know Ayn Rand has been very pivotal and crucial in your, I would say, personal and professional life. But do you think that that philosophy of hers resonated with you because of your immigrant story? Coming, basically going from, arriving here, not speaking the language, having to, fend for yourself, do small jobs to earn a living, pay for your school, and trying to make it.
I definitely think that helped. And actually her story, which I didn't know at the time, was somewhat similar. Like she was also a Russian immigrant. Wound up going into writing in Hollywood as opposed to finance, but somewhat similar story. But I had no idea about any of that. I picked up Atlas Shrugged at I think it was a garage sale, and it randomly sat on my bookshelf for years when I was in high school.
Where was the garage sale?
Well, this is like another weird immigrant thing. You're always looking for bargains, right?
Yeah.
So when we arrived, I have vivid memories of like carrying a couch that we found in an alley back to our house, with helping my parents do that. And then they were always going to garage sales. So I picked up a copy, but it's like an intimidating book. It's as a kid, it's like a 1,200-page book, and so it sat on my bookshelf for years. And then eventually I started reading it, and I was like, whoa, this is actually something I can't put down. So that was part of what resonated, but I think the bigger part was just you constantly are inundated, I think, in the overall media and most things you read, that there's this tension between being very successful and making money on the one hand, and being kind of highly moral and ethical on the other, right? And what I think she clearly articulates, and in a very enjoyable way through fiction, it's actually self-reinforcing as opposed to a dichotomy. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So that basic concept really appealed to me.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think you took this away with you as well in the culture of BAM, right?
Yeah, exactly. So again, when we started, we were severely undercapitalized relative to our competitors, right? Like at the time, our competitors were running probably 25 times what we were managing. The whole industry was much smaller, but the ratio in terms of how much we were managing versus others was, we were very undersized. And they already had, a decade plus of success at good scale at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very hard to compete, economically. So how do you attract talent? And this whole business is about attracting and retaining, talent and developing people. So if you could create a value proposition that people felt they were being treated differently, and they had an opportunity to help build something, and it was a very empowering type of place as opposed to this kind of management trader typical style at the time, right? I thought that would be differentiating, and it's also like the way I've always been attracted to running,
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's a trading group or other things that I've been involved with. And that really became a differentiator over time, and we created a much more collaborative type of structure that kind of married these individual incentives with a much more collegial environment and collaborative place and empowering type of management trader relationship, where now it's evolving into like a broader partnership, and that became a way that you could somewhat make up for having lower capital,
Mm-hmm.
until the capital over time has been catching up.
So basically, you choosing to have this kind of course, entrepreneurial culture, but at the same time having this collaborative partnership style structure, which is different from your peers.
Yep.
I mean, most of them.
Yeah, exactly. So again, like I thought this distinction that most trading investment firms have, where it's either you can't manage, you can manage risk and have people separate, but they couldn't speak to each other, and you had to have like a very silo type of culture, or you'd have huge risk management problems, right? Like I thought that never made any sense to me. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I thought you could really accomplish both, and you could actually have better opportunities to spot gaps between strategies and to spot trends that might start in one place and then and go to another if you had a more open kind of environment, and that shouldn't stand in the way of being able to manage risk in a disciplined way. So I kind of thought that was like a false choice, and if you could create that, then it creates a platform where you get the best of both worlds, where somebody can get compensated on their individual performance. They could have the resources of a large firm, but they could also enjoy coming to the office and enjoy talking to their colleagues and get value out of those interactions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty impressed with the culture. I mean, and what you have created. And maybe I can add to it, it's a sense that I have about BAM and yourself is also humility and resilience.
Yep.
Might be very strong in terms of the values of the house.
Yep.
And and if I hear your story from the beginning, I feel it's also your personal story is transpiring through that. Am I correct?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's also quite common in the markets. Like when you look at both firms and individuals who've stood the test of time, like those traits are very high up.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you have a lot of, arrogance,
Mm-hmm.
or you have an inability to sort of step back and go, this worked, it did great, now it's not working, like how do I figure this out? And take something core of what I'm good at, but also adapt it to what's going on now. If you can't do that, like whether it's an individual or a firm, like they just disappear over time.
Yeah.
Right. It's easy to find people or firms who have done very well in a particular type of environment. You catch a trade, you catch a trend, you ride it, it's great, but then inevitably it changes. And so you really need that humility, that open-mindedness to balance, what's working now with what might work tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, as you said, it's time wisdom, right? Is wisdom built through time and experience, and more I would say, like, getting the market is a difficult place. I mean, you don't win all the time, and you can only hope to win more than certain percentage of times.
Yep.
And you need to be able to sustain that over a long period of time. You need to build that mentality.
Totally, and a lot of it is money management, right? It's not just how your winning percentage. It's how much do you make when you win versus how much do you lose when you lose.
100%.
Right, because you're not gonna, very few strategies do you have very high winning percentages all the time.
Yeah.
Right? And if you do, they have a very negative skew. So figuring out your bet size and how to evolve that is really important, right? And I think that's helped us, me as a trader individually, but also the firm overall. Like we take the risk up and down, and I think we've done a reasonably good job at adapting in difficult environments, and gotten through periods like 2008, making a little bit of money, where there's no way you would have been able to kind of withstand those periods if you had like a much more no, I'm right and this is how we do things, and
Yeah. I mean, especially in 2008. I mean, 2008 and even 2020 was actually pretty. The market swings at the moment are pretty
definitely
wild.
very high, yeah, and that creates opportunities. Like we had a very good year in 2020, and it just sometimes that volatility creates very good opportunities if you can take advantage of it. But that again requires like being very open-minded to different potential outcomes, and then changing how you're trading and investing based on how things are going, as opposed to just saying, here's the ultimate destination where I believe something's going to go, and I'm just going to hold through all the volatility in the meantime. That's that's a very difficult way, I believe, to run a sustainable business.
Difficult or impossible.
Yeah.
So actually, we're gearing towards the end of this conversation. I'm really enjoying it, and I think it's very valuable. And I would like to ask you a question: what advice would you give to your younger self if you were arriving in the U.S. at 7, you were not speaking the language? What advice would you give yourself throughout those formative years now, or to the next generation, I would say?
Well, I guess to myself, I wish I would have sought out, experienced people even earlier. I was sort of in this little bubble trying to just figure things out on my own for 25 years until I kind of started making some connections with more experienced people. I retrospect wish I would have started that earlier, and probably would have been much further along in in exactly what type of investing and trading I wanted to do, and how to be a little more successful at it a little bit earlier. I'm not naturally like a great networker, right? So I wish I was a little bit better at that, and trying to get better at it. I think now, like somebody in my with a similar situation that I was in, just has so many more resources, right? Like you can pull up podcasts by very successful people in every particular type of career, right? And kind of hear their stories and what worked and what didn't, and I love listening to those. That's an amazing source of wisdom that you can get by clicking a button, right? And you hear a 2-hour conversation with somebody, and then via social media and introduction and LinkedIn and things like that, like everyone is a couple people away from being connected to whoever you want to talk to. And so I would definitely encourage people to take advantage of that, whether it's online or internships or setting up a coffee or just exchanging an email or just listening to what somebody said and referring to it and getting an intro. And you could just learn so much that shortcuts your path rather than trying to just bang your head against the wall for a long time until you figure it out yourself. And then through that process you can connect a little bit more clearly with the path that you want to be on, or shift it at any point, right? Just because that's so available. And then taking advantage of any opportunities related to that, whether internships, study abroads, like just volunteering at a company to get their coffee and just be exposed to people. Those are just so valuable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
This was a very wise advice to your younger self in a different day and age. Is there a question you wish I would have asked you about your, under the lens of obviously I can ask you a question about finance, but it's not the topic today.
Yeah.
It's about your immigrant journey. Is there something you wish to tell us that I didn't ask you?
I think in general, immigration is a fantastic way for countries to bring in fresh ideas, fresh drive, and grow the success of the overall country.
Mm-hmm.
Like I sort of look at it very similarly to hiring in a company, right? Like if you're not constantly hiring and constantly interviewing, even when you don't have a role tomorrow, like you should still constantly be interviewing, because that's how you're going to identify people and get ideas and improve your business. I think it's the same thing for a country, or a country really becomes very insular and kind of stagnates, right? Like anything, whether it's hiring employees or allowing, welcoming immigrants into a country, you have to do your diligence, right? But in the grand scheme of things, I think it's a super positive, force for this country and the world at large to be able to have that as open as possible.
I would agree with you on this note. It's a force and it's a wealth, and the whole premise of actually this whole project is, the name is actually the poem at the base of the Statue of Liberty, and which is bringing this wealth and diversity. And as you said, as a company, a country is almost like a company. You need to bring fresh talent, fresh ideas, fresh energy, and this is how this country was built.
Yeah, exactly, and it raises everybody's game.
100%. Yeah. Dmitry, it was wonderful to have you.
My pleasure.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
This was great.